when we first sort of started thinking about sort of this whole college thing and where to start and all of like the thousands of colleges to potentially choose from, I just went, I don't know how to do this. I have no idea how to do this. And fortunately, on my Facebook feed, on campus planning came up. And so on campus college planning came up. And so I reached out to Tom and said, you know, do you have anything that we can just come in and have a conversation? So we had a free informational session with him, which was wonderful because it gave us insight in terms of, you know, here's some tips on how you narrow down that search. And then from that, we sort of scheduled an additional sort of meeting with him. And in that session, it allowed us then to actually both complete a survey that sort of said, what is our son's desires for college? What's our desire for college? And I thought what was really neat was when we came back together, then it really was side by side. We could see what each other's responses were. And so it wasn't a surprise for either one of us to say, you know, this is what I ranked as my priorities for you. Here's what he ranked as his priorities. And then from that, really our next step in that process, I sort of stepped back and our son then met with Tom and sort of identified, you know, he was like, Mom, I'm good, I got this. So he met with Tom and Tom helped him narrow down 10 colleges and said, and what was really nice was, you know, mapped it out on a grid that said, here's your merit aid, here is, you know, here's sort of key information about that school. And then sort of, now you take this and see which ones interest you. So it really was put back on our son to really take the initiative on that. And I think that really kind of giving him that sort of, I'm trying to think of what to say, sort of giving him the reins to be able to do that. I see that now, him doing those same skills in college when he's got to figure stuff out. And so I found that really helpful to see a glimpse then that he can do this. And when he's in college, he can figure this out. And so it's really up to him to do this because ultimately as a parent, we want what's best for them. But at some point, they have to stand on their own 2 feet and they have to do it themselves. So this really was an opportunity for me to sort of take that step back. So I think being able to narrow down that search and really to identify really what I wanted for him and what he wanted for him. So really kind of sitting down together and kind of learning from what, as a parent, what do I think are his strengths? What are sort of where I see him flourish as an individual? And then really being able to come together and hear it from his perspective. Kind of like, what do I want? Do I want a big campus? Do I want a small campus? And he didn't quite know. He knew he didn't want a big campus, but he wasn't sure where he wanted to go. He knew that he didn't want to go where it was too hot or too cold, you know, kind of like, what was that, Goldilocks? I want it just right. So from that perspective, so I think being able to sort of narrow that down was really helpful. Learning about things like merit aid. I didn't know what merit aid was and how that is offered from some of the universities, and finding out how to go about knowing which universities offer that and how that helps. Knowing which were sort of our narrowed down 10 or the schools that we were going to go to, that was really helpful to be able to then say, okay, so of these 10, now we've narrowed it down from thousands, now to have him, our son, then go ahead and do the research. Because, you know, I can try to do this research, but ultimately it's going to be where he wants to land and where he's going to go. So I really sort of pushed that on him as a parent, and I know maybe not everybody wants to do that, but at some point you have to let them stand on their own. And I thought this was a great way for him to get his feet wet and really to take that initiative. So in terms of kind of working through kind of that communication piece, because as a parent, and I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I'm a planner. So I have a list and I have my 10 schools that, you know, potentially that we're going to look at. That's what he's going to decide on. And I'm ready to put it all on a board and go, okay, so here's the school, here's what we're going to do. And so we started to do that. That was my idea, that was not his idea. So, but it was really about, here's the school, here's what it costs, here's what the application deadline is. But then we kind of sat down and said, okay, why don't you tell me what you like about the school? What are some potential challenges that you have for the school? And so we initially started really good with that. And then, because of course, that was not his idea, that was my idea. So, but it was really, my thought was, I'll just put him on a wall and he can add to it at any point. Yeah, it didn't happen. So it actually ended up more of, I think it added more stress for him with that. And I was thinking from my perspective was, I was coming at it as this is how it would work for me for planning. And really, so learning how to communicate and figure out, this is really him driving that bus. So I think it's really helpful to go and actually see the school, because it may be something that, on paper, on video, it doesn't quite look the same until you actually get there and you actually experience it. And for us, it was really helpful if your child knows what major they want to be in, take the time. And my son will, if he was here, he would tell you the same thing. Take the time and actually, if you know the degree, find the day and that tour that's specific to that degree, because they actually go into way more in-depth on that day's visit. You start looking at the colleges and you start looking at prices, and as a parent you're going, I don't know if we have enough saved for this. And so, you may not be in a situation where you can actually afford to pay for any of your students' schooling. And so it really is about having those conversations with them about, how are we going to pay for this? Does it require your student to take out loans? Are they eligible for grants? Because in those cases, they don't have to pay those back in most cases. There's also, some schools offer the merit aid. So depending on what your grade point average is and your ACT or your SAT scores, they'll actually subsidize part of your yearly tuition. So it's sort of like a scholarship, but it's granted over a 4-year time period. So for parents of freshmen and sophomores, and even 8th graders, I would say the more you can start looking at colleges and having those conversations with your kids, the easier it's going to be by the time they get to be a junior and a senior. Because the reality is, by the time you're a junior, they're going to tell you, how am I supposed to know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Some kids might know exactly what they want to do and what their career path is, what school they want to go to. The majority of kids, I'm going to gather, don't. So having those conversations, go and make it fun. Go do college visits. Plan your spring breaks around that. Plan your fall breaks. It takes the pressure off. But I will say, what I really encourage you to do is just breathe through the whole process, because in the blink of an eye, it goes by faster than you think. And when you think they're only a freshman, I don't need to worry about that, the more proactive. And even as a parent, if you're thinking, how are we going to afford this? You don't want to be sitting there going, we'd really love to send you to this college, but we can't afford to send you. And so having those conversations earlier and sort of laying that all out with them is much better than you having more pressure on yourself to send them to a school that maybe you can't afford to send them to, but this is what they want. And you hadn't thought about what are the scholarships are available. Does their GPA really impact? Are there other things in terms of grants or other aid that we can get that if we had more time, we could have done a little more research on? It really does feel overwhelming. I mean, it honestly does feel overwhelming, because you're sitting there going, okay, it's October, December 1st is when we should have our applications in. And so being able to identify and kind of lay out what your steps are and knowing what those deadlines are, especially if your child knows that they're going to go on to a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. Do they want to take a gap year? But understanding all of that and sort of knowing when those things are due will help alleviate some of the stress down the road. I can tell you, 2 weeks before our summer for college, even after he accepted, we were getting ready to go. 2 weeks before he went, he said, I'm not sure I want to do this. I think I might take a gap year. So we sat down as a family, had a conversation, and said, you know what, give it a semester. And I think he still, in the back of his head, was thinking in terms of it's still a lot of money. And all we said was, then do your best. Then make it worth it and give it a semester. And so we dropped him off in mid-August, and we're actually 2 months in. We're actually going to go see him this weekend. So for us, it really was like, they really do end up figuring it all out. And as a parent, I think you see it as harder for you, being them away from home, and it just gives them a chance to grow and flourish. And like I said, prepping for his college applications really helps them prep for getting into college, because the reality is college is nothing like high school. So it's going to be a totally different environment. For some kids, this is the first time that they're out on their own. And so they're going to experience things, they're going to experiment. They may not call you as much as you want, but they'll call you and they'll reach out in the best way that they can. And you just have to trust that they're doing good, and know that you have a good foundation in your family and that support system, and they'll do amazing things that you your heart will go